would have expected.
Well, the state earned a B in economic performance, a C in business vitality, and a D in developmental capacity. According to the Corporation for Enterprise Development, development capacity grades the state's capacity for future growth and recovery from economic problems. Colorado, by the way, was the only state to receive all A's.
Governor Bill Janklow today declared 6 more South Dakota counties as state disaster areas. This brings to 44 the number of counties the governor is asking President Clinton to declare as federal disaster areas because of spring flooding. The 6 new counties today include Bonham, Douglas, Grant, Hutchinson, Lincoln, and Walworth. A federal disaster declaration would make the counties hit with high water eligible for federal disaster relief programs.
Well, Sioux Falls is booming at any rate, and it seems the only thing keeping it from growing even more is the availability of people to work in industry. But that means those people have to have a place to live. And affordable housing is tough to find locally. So today, a group of Sioux Falls business leaders unveiled a long-awaited solution in a partnership. Ted Koppy reports.
The apartment complex you see doesn't look all that unusual, but it is. Not in its design, but in how it was paid for. The River Run Apartments are one of a number of affordable housing complexes in Sioux Falls, made possible thanks to this group, the Sioux Empire Housing Partnership, a group of businesses, financial lenders, government agencies like the South Dakota Housing Development Authority, and developers with one goal: to reduce the mortgage amount on housing facilities and pass those savings on to tenants with qualifying low incomes. So far, the group has pooled $6.3 million to help build apartments like this one. What it boils down to is more multiple family housing for Sioux Falls, which task force leaders admit addresses only immediate affordable housing needs here. Sioux Falls Planning Director Steve Metley refers to the Planning Department's housing forecast for the year 2015.
These young people that are moving into town are going to move up in the income brackets in town, are going to demand more single-family housing. So what we're saying is, as we move along with these kinds of organizations, we'll want to move more toward trying to find ways to assist with single-family housing.
Housing Task Force Chair Doug Hayek says today's announcement is just the first step.
It has never been our objective to concentrate on multifamily housing because I think all of us on the task force, and I know the mayor agrees, that for people who want to have single-family homes, that's the best. That makes the best community.
That, says Hayek, is the next step. But until then, the Housing Partnership will focus on what they call better affordable housing, meaning more apartments with outside entrances, on-site playgrounds for children, and more maintenance. Something possible, partnership members say, because of one thing: cooperation. In Sioux Falls, Ted Koppy, News 5.
Long distance and emergency telephone service throughout much of eastern and central South Dakota was interrupted today after a fiber optic cable was cut west of Salem. The cut cable shut off major phone routing links between Sioux Falls, Mitchell, Pierre, Aberdeen, and Watertown. A backup system from U.S. West Telephone Company was in place but could not handle the volume of calls. Emergency 911 phone service in McCook and Minnehaha counties had to bear the brunt of the overload. Metro Communications in Sioux Falls found itself virtually cut off from many places. The phone mess was a potentially expensive problem for many businesses, and there was a danger of life-threatening situations for emergency calls. 911 dispatchers made do with an alternative 7-digit number this afternoon.
I forgot it was in there.
I know. We deal with public safety. We deal with lives and property every day. So it was taken very serious. We called U.S. West right away to find out what happened and how long it was going to take. And then we notified the media so that the public would have a backup number to call if they should call 911 and couldn't get through. We'd hate to see someone's father or wife or something having a heart attack and they call 911 and can't get help.
U.S. West reports tonight that it repaired all of the cut fiber optic cables by 7:45 tonight. Several communities, by the way, were without long-distance service all afternoon.
There will be no retrial of the Black Hills Institute of Geological Research on charges of stealing fossils. That includes the Tyrannosaurus Rex skeleton nicknamed Sue from federal land. Also charges of laundering money, concealing evidence, and falsifying customer documents. The federal prosecutor, Karen Schreier, says a retrial would not be using the best use of the government resources. In March, a federal jury in Rapid City found the defendants guilty of only 8 felonies and 5 misdemeanors. Dozens of other charges deadlocked the jury.
In a moment, another security breach at the White House and gunfire.
A fence jumper shot. Next on News 5.
It's the best night's security breach and shooting. The president left for his morning jog through a door he seldom uses, and White House security was tight. It was around 10:45 last night, after Mr. Clinton finished a speech on Capitol Hill, after his motorcade got back to the White House, a half hour after Mr. Clinton walked into the south entrance, that the electronic intrusion alarms went off. Man over the fence. Secret Service agents caught up with 37-year-old Leland William Majeski on the south lawn as he ran toward the mansion. They say one officer fired one shot when he realized Majeski had a gun. The bullet piercing Majeski's arm, then the arm of Secret Service officer Scott Giambattista. All of this taking place just a few steps away from the White House itself. Spokesman Mike McCurry says the First Lady and Chelsea were upstairs, the president at the other end of the building in his office.
The Secret Service did a terrific job last night. He felt in no danger at any time, nor did Mrs. Clinton or Chelsea.
Federal investigators rushed to Majeski's home in suburban Falls Church, Virginia, and took his wife in for questioning. Leland Majeski, seen here in 1976, had reportedly been fired from his job at a pizza restaurant, but had no history of threatening the president.
There is some indication of a mental history. We're just getting into the very beginning of looking at that.
Last September, an unlicensed pilot smashed his plane into the White House. In October, a Colorado man sprayed the mansion with automatic gunfire. And in the wake of the bombing in Oklahoma City last Saturday, Mr. Clinton ordered Pennsylvania Avenue closed to vehicles in front of the White House. But that can't stop what the Secret Service calls fence jumpers.
Well, if Majeski intended violence, he was not very well prepared. The Secret Service found his gun not loaded. Majeski was charged this afternoon with assault and firearms violations. It was like old times in the O.J. Simpson double murder trial today in Los Angeles. The prosecutor, Marcia Clark, and defense attorney Johnny Cochran were on their feet arguing to the judge on a potentially critical point. As John Gibson reports, the point may allow O.J. Simpson to effectively testify in his own defense without being cross-examined.
Came on a response from LAPD criminalist Colin Yamauchi about why he didn't necessarily expect his test to show O.J. Simpson's blood.
I heard on the news that, well, yeah, he's got an airtight alibi. He's in Chicago. And
the defense says that statement, the airtight alibi reference, opens the door to the defense using Simpson's statement to police. On June 13th, Simpson said things to the police that might hurt him, but overall, he offers explanations that the defense wants the jury to hear and is willing to accept any damage other parts of the statement might cause. The prosecution says Simpson's statement has nothing to do with testimony.
That he's talking about his conclusion drawn from the fact that he heard the defendant was in Chicago. How could that possibly relate to the content of the defendant's statement?
Johnny Cochran was next.
We certainly aren't going to yell at Your Honor and become hysterical. We would...
I object to that characterization. Your Honor, that kind of personal attack is very improper and inappropriate. The court knows that it was simply advocacy. I'm not yelling at anyone. And for Mr. Cochran to make that kind of sexist remark, hysterical, I take great umbrage at it. And I think the court should not countenance that kind of behavior.
I don't.
She finished? Yeah, Your Honor. I'm not going to yell at Your Honor. I'm going to try to deal with the facts.
Judge Ito said he thought the witness did open the door to the defense bringing Simpson's statement in, and he will decide tomorrow.
The O.J. Simpson trial over the past year has focused new attention on the continuing problem of domestic abuse. And for domestic abuse victims, many find it difficult to leave an abusive home life and start again from scratch. But tonight, Beth Fuller talks with one of those abuse victims who explained why she and others are afraid of losing federal support.
Last year, nearly 800 women and children stayed in rooms like this one at the Children's Inn in Sioux Falls. One of those victims of domestic violence is this woman who did not want to be identified. We'll call her Mary. She and her 5 children stayed here after leaving her husband last Thanksgiving. They suffered 5 years of family violence. Mary says she was shocked at how hard it was to survive on their own.
What do you do? Where do you go? So then you live in your little car in town with your kids going, I'm here. How did I get here? I'm educated. I'm okay. I've got a job. I'm a good mom. And how does society see that?
Shelter directors for victims of domestic violence say Mary's dilemma is all too common, and leaving the situation is just the first of many difficult steps victims face when trying to rebuild their lives.
You have a woman who is in a battering relationship and she goes to leave. A lot of the times the isolation is so great that she doesn't have the job training because he wouldn't let her go out and work. Or if she went out and worked, he sabotaged it every time she turned around. He doesn't want to see her further her education. She needs to be home.
Shelter directors met in Sioux Falls today in opposition to the Personal Responsibility Act, now before the United States Senate. The act would make it more difficult for victims of domestic abuse that are in poverty to get aid.
They depend on that safety net regarding food stamps and AFDC in order to escape altogether.
Mary agrees. She says without a network of support, surviving on her own would be impossible. But because of that help, she and her children have another chance. In Sioux Falls, Beth Fuller, News 5.
The senior class at Mitchell High School will have a student-led prayer during graduation this Sunday. 88% of the Mitchell seniors voted for that prayer. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled time and again that administration-led prayers at graduation ceremonies are unconstitutional. But the legal status of a totally student-run prayer is not legally clear.
A group of big-time donors received honors today in Sioux Falls, not for giving money, but for giving blood. The Sioux Falls Regional Blood Bank honored those who gave more than a gallon of blood during 1994, and the 3 people who have now reached the 10-gallon mark. Citibank, the City of Del Rapids, South Dakota State University, City Hall in Sioux Falls, and Sioux Steel Company were recognized also for their blood bank support with bloodmobile drives.
Well, soon the name of a former student at the South Dakota School for the Deaf will be part of the National AIDS Memorial Quilt. This afternoon, students at the School for the Deaf, along with former classmates and family of Leif Eliasson, gathered at the school for a display of several sections of the acres-large AIDS quilt. The quilt is comprised of panels, each with the name of a victim of AIDS. Leif Eliasson was an artist, and the current School for the Deaf art students designed and made Leif's panel for the national quilt. The panel will be sewn into a section of the quilt.
What I was afraid of when he had AIDS is that once he died, it would tear our family apart. But I think through this, our family has come closer together. And at first, we weren't able to talk about it, but now we're able to talk about it a lot more. And it's comforting to be able to talk to your family about it.
Leif's panel of the AIDS quilt will be among several on display at high schools across the country. The AIDS quilt sections, including Leif's, will be on display for the public locally tomorrow at the School for the Deaf until 3 p.m.
Across the nation, this is Stroke Awareness Month, a time to consider the risk you may have to this sudden problem that can kill, cripple, or severely debilitate a person. A stroke is not rare. It is the 3rd leading cause of death in the U.S. right now, with about 145,000 killed each year. Cammie Melton's health report tonight focuses on how you can prevent strokes.
This woman is being shown how one of her arteries is becoming clogged, putting her at risk for a stroke. Without enough blood getting through to the brain, tissue will die, and it's possible she could too. How common are strokes?
Very common. It's one of the, it's in the top 3 leading causes of death and disability in the country.
But you can lower your risk of having a stroke by reducing the amount of fat, cholesterol, and salt in your diet. Quit smoking, limit the amount of alcohol you take in, and exercise on a regular basis.
16 minutes, okay?
Okay. Bernadette Smith has had both a heart attack and a stroke. Now she's changing her lifestyle in hopes of regaining her health.
Kind of eating the right food, walking when I can, and then coming down here. I tire out so easy.
But she says the exercise helps. She, along with many Americans, knows the symptoms of a heart attack, but when she began having slurred speech, she didn't recognize it as a stroke warning sign. Luckily, her daughters did, but there are many other signs you can look for.
Weakness or paralysis. Sometimes a person can have numbness on one side of the body. Sometimes a stroke can cause loss of vision in an eye or trouble seeing to one side or the other.
Those with high blood pressure, cholesterol, and a family history of cardiovascular disease are the most vulnerable. But doctors say the first step to avoiding a stroke is to make a conscious effort to look for those symptoms and know when you're at risk. In Sioux Falls, Cammie Melton, News 5.
I'm betting you didn't have a lot of complaints today about the weather.
Sure didn't. A little bit higher than my expectations, of course, last night, but definitely no problem there. If you have not sent in your weather picture, here's the address, and we are back with tonight's weather pick after this.
Looking for a little action? We've got what you're looking for. Jeep Cherokee with an action-packed 190 horsepower engine, driver's airbag, 4-wheel drive, automatic, no-charge air, AM/FM stereo, and more. And if you're looking for an action figure, we've got that too. Now, get a Jeep Cherokee for just over $18,600. Battery included, no assembly required.
See your local Jeep and Eagle dealer for the best in automotive sales, service, and value.
In Aberdeen, it's a budding rock band. In Huron, it's their first batch of cookies. In Yankton, there are 520 people who call it a living. All across the Great Plains, we serve thousands of people in ways that make their lives easier, more rewarding, and more productive. You can call it fun, call it work, call it security, call it breakfast, call it what you will. We call it service. We're here for you. We're Northwestern Public Service Company.
Hi, I'm Tom Cook with Ducks Unlimited. If you're a hunter or just enjoy the outdoors, I want you to be aware of what your Great Plains GMC dealers are doing to help preserve our wildlife environment. Through their generous provision of new GMC trucks to Ducks Unlimited, we've been able to raise over $100,000 to help preserve waterfowl and wetland habitat in South Dakota and western Minnesota. I ask that you keep this in mind when you're in the market for a new truck. Support those that support us, your Great Plains GMC dealers.
Beautiful furniture, all of it on sale, and a gorgeous designer floor lamp, a $99 value, free with any purchase of $199 or more at Inwood Furniture.
Later on The Tonight Show, Jay is partying tonight with Dr. Quinn's Jane Seymour and rock and roll legend Jerry Lee Lewis. Then live from the Cannes Film Festival, Alexandra Wentworth with Dennis Hopper, Marissa Tomei, Will Smith, and Roger Ebert. Plus one of America's silliest kids and Jay in a silly fest. And a Dancing Edo tribute to a Broadway...
Keep it out. Marcia Clark went volcanic when the judge said it appeared to him the door was open for the defense to bring it in.
That was this witness's opinion, Your Honor. What does that have to do with the defendant's statement?
Meanwhile, in testimony today, Simpson's dirty laundry displayed to the jury, his socks with those incriminating splatters of Nicole Simpson's blood. And the prosecution showed the jury pictures of defense experts mishandling those socks, just what the defense has accused the LAPD criminalists of doing.
He's got gloves on, is that correct?
Yes, he does.
Did Dr. Lee ever change gloves during this entire 1-hour examination of both of those socks?
I didn't see him change his gloves.
And remember that book that Cato Kalin swore he was not writing? It will be in the bookstores soon. It's different than Cato's testimony under oath. In the book, Cato says O.J. Simpson was extremely angry and upset with Nicole Simpson the day of the murders because Nicole wouldn't let O.J. see daughter Sydney after her dance recital.
So far, the court does not give a reason for dismissing another juror. This leaves only 4 alternates left in the jury pool with possibly months to go in the trial.
Construction has now closed the ramps to and off of Interstate 229 at 10th Street in Sioux Falls. The closing and temporary routing under the 10th Street overpass under construction will likely slow down driving in both directions on 229 even more than before. The South Dakota Department of Transportation asked drivers to observe the 30-mile-per-hour speed limit throughout the area, which will be enforced. Oversized vehicles have to use another route during this phase of the overpass construction. Are we going to eke out one more nice day today?
Boy, I think today we were pushing our luck.
Yeah.
It was about the last straw here. Tomorrow, we got rain on the way, and could be quite a bit. We'll tell you about that after you take a look at the address for Cook's Weather Pick. Back with tonight's after this.
It's the best offer ever on America's best-selling car. Right now, you can get up to $1,500 cash back, buy or lease on any Ford Taurus in stock. $1,500. Sedans, wagons, SHO, even the sporty new Taurus SE. They're all available with up to $1,500 customer cash, which means you can lease a Taurus, sedan, or wagon for just $268 a month for 24 months.
Penitentiary for sexual contact with a child and had a history of mental problems. Joe Kaminsky, the man under arrest for the shooting outside of the 7-Eleven store in Huron, is a respected member of the community. Now, Kaminsky's lawyer says problems between the men came to a head recently and involved an unspecified incident many years ago. The lawyer says King recently started harassing and terrifying the Kaminsky family. Again, according to Kaminsky's attorney, his client was afraid King was about to do something to Kaminsky's wife and children. Kaminsky will face a preliminary hearing in Huron on Tuesday.
The first 3-day weekend of the year means hundreds of thousands of cars on the road. All that extra traffic means an increase in traffic hazards and hazards to public parks. Tonight, Cammie Melton has a few tips on how to keep your holiday weekend tragedy-free.
An estimated 30 million Americans are expected to have to travel to get to their Memorial Day destination this weekend, and 80% of them will go by car, making the roads a busy and sometimes dangerous place to be.
There's more accidents because there's more people out on the road, but those can be avoided if people just use a little more caution than they're used to using.
Hartman says he can't remember a Memorial Day weekend that didn't involve a fatal accident, but he hopes maybe this year people will take their time and be a bit safer.
I'd just like to see people slow down a little bit and show a little courtesy for the other drivers, and also wear their seat belts and avoid the drinking and driving for the weekend, and it should be a good one.
The paths will be as wet as the roads you'll be on to get here. If your destination is one of the state parks, a little common sense can make your weekend in the wilderness as safe as a weekend in your own backyard. Starting first by remembering to avoid the damp rocks while you're hiking. They'll be slippery all weekend long.
Even though the paths are wet, they're still the best place to walk.
They do need to be aware, though, that we do have poison ivy and stinging nettles out here. So the best way to avoid those kind of plants is probably just to stay right on the trail, and then they're not going to have any trouble with that.
And keeping an eye on your children is a key part to ensuring a safe family weekend, especially around the campfire.
You need to be aware, if you have small children, to always keep in mind that it's a big attraction for the children. So keep an eye on them, keep them in sight, always have a bucket of water and have a shovel, and make sure that when you're done with your campfire that you always have it completely put out.
And as you finish packing, keep in mind that although it may not be the most convenient, bringing things that are not disposable will reduce the amount of garbage in the parks and keep the animals there safer as well. Near Garrettson, Cammie Melton, News 5.
And apparently people are taking safety on the roads more seriously in South Dakota. Last year at this time, there were 52 traffic fatalities reported. So far this year, only 31 in South Dakota.
President Clinton today approved a disaster declaration for 38 South Dakota counties hit by flooding earlier this spring. Governor Janklow recently asked the presidents for disaster declarations for 44 counties, but the paperwork for the latest 6 has not been cleared through the White House yet. The presidential declaration will allow those living in the 38 affected counties to apply for a variety of federal assistance programs. South Dakota Senator Tom Daschle says the declaration took longer than usual because of the budget-cutting fever now in Washington, making it tougher to find money to fund the disaster declaration.
Well, chances are, if you're planning to spend the Memorial Day weekend at one of South Dakota's state parks, the recent flooding won't keep you away. Still, several state parks are closed because of high water. Beth Fuller reports on how that might turn into good news if you don't have a reservation.
Lovely weather we're having.
Palisades State Park and campgrounds are ready for Memorial Day weekend visitors, and that's the case with most state parks and campgrounds. Although weather is creating less than ideal conditions, flooding is only keeping 4 state campgrounds closed this weekend. They are Fisher Grove near Redfield, Lake Cochran near Clear Lake, American Creek Recreation Area near Chamberlain, and North Point near Pickstown. Palisades Park Manager Mark Steck says they're lucky their campsites are on high ground.
This area of the county is really well drained, and so we don't get much standing water. The drainages, they fill up quickly. They may come up a little bit more quickly, but they also go down.
And there's more good news for procrastinators. If you haven't made reservations by now, you'd normally be out of luck. But thanks to the rain, state park phone lines are flooded with cancellations. If you want to reserve a site or cancel your plans, you can call 1-800-710-2267 or CAMP.
The couple of inches of rain in the forecast for today and tomorrow will affect flooding somewhat, but it will probably do more to dampen the spirits of campers as they wait for the sun to come out on Sunday. At Palisades Campground, Beth Fuller, News 5.
In a moment, tonight is for celebration.
But then tomorrow, it's a time for gainful employment for some Southeast Technical Institute graduates. Next on News 5.
It's down to the final day.
Golf equipment is being sold.
Hanover Direct, a Pennsylvania company, is the new owner of Ostads tonight. A spokesman says the new owner will have certain purchasing advantages to Ostads.
Almost 400 newly trained technical school graduates are ready for the workforce now. The students today received associate degrees, diplomas, or certificates during Southeast Technical Institute's graduation ceremonies in Sioux Falls. 378 grads honored in agribusiness, health sciences, trade and industry, and business areas. South Dakota Attorney General Mark Barnett gave the commencement address. Traditionally, local industry grabs up these graduates of training at Southeast quickly. After months of battles, Dr. Henry Foster today won committee approval for confirmation as Surgeon General of the United States. The full U.S. Senate must still vote on the nomination of that controversial obstetrician who admits to performing abortions in the past. But the story's not over, as we see in this report from Steve Handelsman.
A few months ago, President Clinton looked like a loser and Dr. Henry Foster like a goner in the Surgeon General fight. So both savored today's win.
This is a good day for the United States, and I look forward to going on to the next stage and to working right through until we get Dr. Foster confirmed.
I want to thank the President, his administration, congressional members, and my family for supporting me so stoutly during these times.
Earlier, as the Senate committee convened, GOP Chair Nancy Kassebaum said she'd vote no.
Despite his many strengths, I believe that Dr. Foster is the wrong person to step into this badly damaged office at this time.
But all 7 Democrats backed Foster.
He has vision, competence, bedrock values, and the right professional credentials to be the Surgeon General.
And despite the fact it took Foster a few days to reveal the number of abortions he'd performed, 39, 2 Republicans backed him, Jeffords of Vermont and Tennessee heart surgeon Bill Frist.
Not based on politics, but rather on the man, his qualifications, and his ability.
But there's political trouble ahead from GOP Senate Majority Leader Bob Dole, who wants to postpone Foster's confirmation vote. And Dole's presidential rival, GOP Senator Phil Gramm, said today he wants the Surgeon General's job abolished, and failing that, still plans a filibuster against Foster.
Meantime, in the O.J. Simpson double murder trial today, the latest juror to be bounced from the panel says she is not a racist and denies she was writing a book, which she thinks got her kicked off the case. Also today, the judge dealt the defense a major blow, blocking a defense move to bring O.J. Simpson's statement to police into the trial. David Gregory reports.
The court found good cause to replace juror number 12.
Judge Ito gave no explanation for his latest dismissal. The woman who was kicked off led the jury rebellion last month and was accused by ex-juror Jeanette Harris of kicking black panel members. 8 jurors have now been removed, and the latest addition changes the racial makeup of the panel. There are now 8 blacks, 2 whites, and 2 Hispanics.
That's a different issue.
Judge Ito has also decided to keep O.J. Simpson's police statement out of the trial, meaning O.J. would have to take the stand to tell his side of the story.
It's a ruse by the defense to put in a statement that we cannot cross-examine, to let the defendant avoid ever taking the witness stand so that he cannot be cross-examined.
The defense had argued that a reference to Simpson's alibi needs to be fully explained to the jury.
The only way we correct the situation is by having the statement. And certainly, the prosecution is so worried about this, the admission of this statement doesn't mean Mr. Simpson's not going to testify. But it has nothing to do with that.
Were you told by anyone...
In testimony, police criminalist Colin Yamauchi is back on the stand being grilled by Barry Scheck about his testing of blood evidence. And the judge is again getting cranky with the crowd.
If I hear another outburst from the audience, I'm clearing the courtroom. There's nothing funny about this.
Ito also took aim at Barry Scheck's questioning, telling him repeatedly to get on with it.
Well, you might not find it on your television tuner, but there is a new station on the air in Sioux Falls. It's KPSC-TV, actually a once-in-a-while morning show at Annie Sullivan Elementary School. And as we see in this report from Ted Coppy, the show and the stars of it are a hit.
Every other week at 8 a.m., the hosts, or anchors if you will, of KPSC's morning messages take their seats behind the desk to fill in their peers on what's going on for the day. The anchors, Annie Sullivan Elementary 4th graders. The audience, 565 of their schoolmates. Kayla Alexander, one of the several hosts who share this job, summarizes the show.
We tell what's happening for the school and if kids are taking a field trip or something. And we do the weather.
Not to mention live interviews with special guests like Dr. Jack Keegan, the superintendent of Sioux Falls Schools, reports from the field, or from the hallways anyway, and live music. Morning Messages started as a radio show over the school intercom. Then this year, made the transition to closed-circuit TV. It's fairly simple. One camera, one mixer, one switcher, and one director. Fourth grade teacher Lori Stevenson, who spends weeks putting morning messages together. Originally, the show ran about 5 minutes. Today, it's 20 from sign on to sign off, and interest in this program is still growing. Some might argue the show has a captive audience, but these kids are even starting to attract fans.
Do the kids treat you differently now that you're doing this morning show?
Yeah, sometimes they'll come up to you in the day, weren't you on the show, and things like that.
Everybody knows you when you're on the camera, and then when somebody sees you, they go, hey, I saw you on the morning messages this morning.
Rob says someday he'd like to be famous, and at this rate, he probably will. Although from a professional's point of view, Rob and his co-anchors might opt for a more traditional sign-off. In Sioux Falls, Ted Coppy, News 5.
I didn't see anything wrong with that sign-off, Ted. And if you wonder what KPSC means, it's kind peacemakers in a special community.
A statue at the Children's Home Society in Sioux Falls unveiled today pays tribute to the founder of the organization. The CHS showed off its new statue of Elizabeth Sherrod. The statue was a project of daughter of Korshak Julkolski, the creator of the Crazy Horse Monument, and the grandson of Gutsan Borglum of sculptured Mount Rushmore. The Children's Home Society also dedicated its new Madsen House, a 12-bed residence center for the children in need today. There will be some new faces at the Great Plains Zoo starting tomorrow. A new exhibit is actually an old one, 4 Dall's sheep, a special species native to Alaska, rather. The 4 sheep were born in captivity in Chicago's Brooklyn Field Zoo. They are between 2 and 3 years of age. These sheep replace an exhibit taken down a couple of years ago for pen repairs.
If you plan to spend your Memorial Day weekend or any weekend this summer on the water, there are some new rules in effect you really ought to know about. But as John Austin reports, some wonder whether the new rules are tough enough.
Under current U.S. Coast Guard regulations, every passenger in every boat must be equipped with an available and approved personal flotation device. The requirement was expanded last May 1st to include boats smaller than 16 feet, the ones that need them, the size of craft responsible for 3/4 of fatalities nationwide. But there is nothing in the new federal regs that say life jackets have to be worn. 25 states require that children wear PFDs at all times. South Dakota does not. And Bill Shattuck, South Dakota's Water Safety Program Director, says he hopes the state can pass mandatory PFD legislation for children before a senseless tragedy forces our hand. Shattuck's concern is shared by the chairman of the National Transportation Safety Board.
A life jacket does not work unless it's on your child. And obviously, in an emergency situation, the child may or may not have time to locate and put on the life jacket, particularly if the child is thrown from the boat into the water.
Though tempted by warm sun whenever it arrives and calm water, parents tempted to let their kids wander the deck without their life jackets should consider. The last 2 children to die in boating accidents in South Dakota were in canoes during fairly nice weather, not wearing a life jacket. In fact, most fatalities occur when conditions seem ideal for boating. But of the more than 15 fatalities this decade, only 1 involves someone wearing a life jacket. Good reasons for parents to do a little better than the law requires. John Austin, News 5.
Well, Scott Bowden in for Rob Cook tonight. Rob found out what the weather was going to be doing and get out of town, I guess, huh?
Decided to have me do the forecast. Well, if you're going to do any boating this weekend, you probably don't want to do it on Saturday or Sunday. Moving into Monday, we'll see the nice weather move in, so make your plans then. We'll have all the details next.
Maybe you've always seen yourself in a Jeep Grand Cherokee with a 190 horsepower engine, anti-lock brake,
Union